Welcome to my podcast, How I Found My Beautiful. My name is Cindy Crow, founder of Birds Be Free, a cosmetic company whose mission is to empower people who are in recovery from substance abuse and addiction. On our podcast, we will talk about the issues, the challenges, and the success stories that people in recovery from addiction are faced with. And our hope with this podcast is that everyone can learn something from the experiences of our guests. Please subscribe to the podcast, like us on Facebook, and go to our website, www.birdsbefree.com, to see how we are positively changing the lives of people in our community that are in recovery. Our communities will get better, and our families will be stronger by paying it forward and helping one person at a time. Won't you join us? Welcome to our first episode of How I Found My Beautiful. My name is Cindy Crow Lane, and thank you for joining us. One of the reasons that I'm involved in How I Found My Beautiful is because I'm a cosmetologist and I love making people look beautiful. I've been doing it for 29 years, and I found my beautiful for the first time when I had my makeup and hair done by a Mary Kay rep. And it was a life-changing, defining moment for me. And so as I ventured and moved on down the road with all my experiences in cosmetology, I specialize in doing makeovers. And I have a son who ended up incarcerated for being a drug addict and violating probation. And he was explaining to me that a lot of the people that are incarcerated do not have people that come and visit them. They don't have people who send them letters or put money on their commissaries. And it was really heart-wrenching for him to see how many people were truly lonely. And he was so thankful for the jail system that he was in, that they had programs for people to come in and offer NA meetings or AA meetings, and also do Celebrate Recovery, and also have church, and individually counsel them with the chaplains that are there at the jail. So I thought, well, if these men are coming in and helping my son, I want to give back to the women. So I asked to volunteer to go in and do a Bible study with the commander's wife, and I was gladly received. And after my first visit inside, she said that she felt one of the main things that the women need were people on the outside who could come along beside them and coach and mentor them, because a lot of them were returning back to their old lifestyles because they had no one. They went back to abusive relationships. They went back into homes where the parents were using. And I thought, you know what? I am going to put together some kind of a program to help these women. So I had gone in the second time to do a Bible study, and I had offered the women a free makeover when they got out, and they were ecstatic. I said, this is what it means. It means you come into my salon, I'll do your makeup, your hair, your skincare. We'll talk about wellness. We'll just love on you like you can't imagine. And here's my phone number. And sure enough, the phone calls started coming in. And as the phone calls started coming in and we started doing these makeovers in the salon, we were seeing transformations taking place in these women. Commander Orr of the jail system that I volunteer for had sent me an email after I had asked him some questions about the program these makeovers we're having on these women. And his response was, it's probably the most that they've ever been loved on. Most of these women have been taught how to manipulate. They have been taught how to disrespect property and people, and it has become a way of life for them. And love for them is a commitment, not a feeling. And we as human beings need this essential human contact connection, This program supports that purpose and gives the ladies some of the very first times in their lives that understanding. And when these women come into the salon, we truly do see that. And that's why we called the program Uncage Your Beauty, because for the first time, these women are coming out and feeling beautiful. One of the ladies that we made over actually was pretty tomboy, and after we gave her cheerleader hair and made her over, she danced into the room and looked into the camera and said, for the first time, "I feel pretty." So our goal with the program is to encourage these women to have the strength to stand out and stand up and say, "I want a better and I want a different life, because when I look in the mirror, I like what I see for the first time." So we are continuing to move forward with our makeovers. We've already done 8, and we're looking to schedule our next 4. We also do a pen pal program for the women that are incarcerated so we can start building relationships with them. When I introduced the pen pal program to the women, the response was, out of 28 women that were incarcerated, 26 of them signed up for the program. And one of the ladies actually stood up and had tears in her eyes and lifted her hands up in the air, and she said, "You mean someone is actually going to know that I am alive?" So yes, we're making changes in our community, and that is the goal for Uncage Your Beauty and our Pen Pal program as well. I'm really excited because, like I said earlier, I have a son who's incarcerated, so I've learned a lot about the system. I've learned a lot about the failure rates. I've learned a lot about the courage it takes for these people when they get out. A lot of them have felons. A lot of them have been beaten down so hard by the system and by their own community and by their families that any kind of support or help that we can give them is like shining a light in the darkness. And I'm really excited today because I have a guest here who I've known for 20 years, and her and I have traveled down the road of addiction and recovery together. She also has someone in her family who is recovering from addiction, and she is a very special woman. She has probably the most courage that I've ever met in any one given person. She has a son with Down syndrome, and I've watched her celebrate his Down syndrome, and I've watched her work through raising 2 daughters and actually going back to school and getting her master's degree through all of this. Her name is Dawn Copus. She's board certified psychiatric nurse practitioner, and she's also certified in addictions advanced practice. And she also has worked for 28 years in outpatient detoxification, and she's also employed at the St. Francis Hospital on the south side of Indianapolis. I'm so thankful you're here. So, Dawn, I'm so glad you're here tonight. I would love to hear from you how you got started in helping people in recovery.
Thank you, Cindy. It's an honor to be here, and I've always been passionate about helping people. I've always been in some type of human resource, human services. I am passionate about recovery. It's an honor to assist those struggling with addiction and partner with them in the opportunity to grow and transform their lives. Yes, there's a lot of challenges that come with being a certified addictions registered advanced practice nurse, but they're also, the challenges are extraordinary, but so is the job satisfaction. And few accomplishments are as gratifying as wrestling back a life commandeered by addiction. I'm in a unique position to contribute and help people with their, healing and recovery of individuals, families, society. I want to help on all levels. I love what you're doing.
Well, it's an honor to work with these women. One of the things that I hear a lot from different people is, well, do you really think that, addiction is a disease? What is your take on that, Dawn?
Well, people say if you consider addiction a disease, then you're taking the responsibility away from people. And I disagree with that. I say if someone has heart disease, don't we tell them to monitor their blood pressure? And wouldn't we ask them to exercise, change their lifestyle, and do something different? If we say someone has diabetes, we want them to check their blood sugar. We want them to change their diet and exercise also. It's something they have to look at and face every day. Well, it's the same with addiction and recovery. There's going to be different things that you have to do every day to practice a program of recovery. And yes, addiction is a disease, and it is they have shown, scientists have studied this, and they've shown that alcohol and drugs make chemical changes to the brain.
So I have seen documentaries on that, and it's pretty impressive to me how far science has come to actually call this problem a disease. By calling it a disease, we're going to see it totally different. We're going to maybe look at how we can help these people and not maybe necessarily put them in prison, but look at reform and putting together different programs that will enable these people to better understand their disease and why they're doing that. I know a lot of talk too, Dawn, is about, well, let's just do medication. Let's, put them on certain medicines and that'll help them not crave their drug of choice. I know that you deal with that in your job. How do you feel that drugs are helping people that are in recovery?
I think there's a lot of medication that can be helpful. I think that sometimes people have underlying mental illness or underlying conditions that predispose them to using. There's a lot of people also diagnosed with depression and anxiety, bipolar illness, and sometimes and post-traumatic stress disorder, and sometimes medication can be helpful. Also, using drugs repeatedly over time changes brain structure and function and the chemical makeup of the brain. Sometimes a medication can be helpful to help stabilize and bring the brain chemistry back to normal. I do, however, draw the line when you're talking about using, taking one drug and replacing it with another. So I think there's a fine line. Antidepressants can be very helpful, mood stabilizers, antipsychotics. A lot of these medications can be very helpful when you've had a change in the brain chemistry as far as dopamine, serotonin, epinephrine, norepinephrine. However, if you're talking about replacing one drug with another, for example, Suboxone or methadone, that's where it gets a little touchy, and at times you're replacing one with another. The other point I would like to make is that you can't stand by medication alone. There's therapy. There's like you said, celebrate recovery. There's 12-step recovery. I believe that you need to cater each program or treatment to the individual. What works for one person is not going to work for another person. We need to individualize these program plans to each person, find out what will work best for that person. Relapse does not have to be a negative thing. If somebody relapses, we need to look at why. We need to change the tactic. We need to look at what's working, what's not working. I don't believe in using medication alone. I believe it's you have to look at the whole picture.
Well, that you said that kind of makes me think about the thread that runs with all these women that I've been working with, and there's always been some type of sexual abuse or some type of physical abuse in their childhood. And, I've always believed that science and medicine and therapy and counseling and 12-step programs work very well together. So back to the drugs. So how is that monitored?
Usually somebody is seeing someone who is licensed, a licensed practitioner who can prescribe medications. They may be going in once a month or even more frequently or less frequently, depending on the person. And they may have to do urine drug screens. They may be asking, talking to their therapist and working together with other people, a team, like a team approach, and maybe working together and monitoring the person's progress and seeing how they're doing.
Do you think that the success rate is higher with the use of medication opposed to just, say, 12-step program?
Well, I believe that a 12-step program can be 100% successful if it's worked the way it's supposed to work. However, uh, I think medication can be helpful too. And most people in 12-step recovery do not, they understand that sometimes people need outside help also.
Do you think that there's an amount of time that the brain needs in order to kind of heal itself? Or, some of the women that I've worked with, it's like it seems like their ability to think quick is kind of slowed down. I mean, there's something that's not connecting in them yet, especially when, they've been clean only a short amount of time. Is there like a amount of time that it takes for the brain to kind of go back to relying on itself and not a drug to keep it going?
Absolutely. I think people need a long period of time. They need to commit to a long period of treatment and being monitored, and somebody to help them to be accountable for a long time. It does take the brain a long time to recover. And then you have the spiritual and emotional side of things, you have the physical side of things, and it takes a while for people to recover.
Yes. Do you find that there's an average age of when people start using?
I don't know that there's an average age. I've seen um, all different age groups, all different times when people have told me they've started. I've had people tell me they started when they were 6 or 7. There were relatives giving them beer or smoking pot with them. Some of them have started at age 10 or 12, some of them in their teen years, and some people don't start until their 20s, until early adulthood. And I've seen people not start until their 30s or 40s. So it just depends.
Yeah. Well, another thing that I've always been interested in is the thing that they call predisposed. Because when you look at the addict, the first thing you want to know is, well, who in your family was an addict? Because it seems like you could have 6 kids and one would be predisposed and the other 5 wouldn't because great grandpa was an addict. So I think that has something to do with it as well.
Yes, it does. Not only that, but there's a personality type. So it depends on your development. It depends on environmental factors. Some of the things that have happened to you. You mentioned sexual assault. In our society, I believe the statistics are something like 1 in 4 women and 1 in 6 men. And I'm absolutely positive those numbers are high in people in recovery. 1 in 4 women have been sexually assaulted or molested, and 1 in 6 men. And that means one person in this room. So that is really high, and that is a what I call a post-traumatic event, and people have post-traumatic stress, and people deal with that in different ways. So you have the genetic piece of things, you have a developmental piece of things, and the environment.
Have you ever had a person who was active in their addiction say they don't want to be an addict?
Of course, and usually they don't. A lot of times people deny it for a long time. And Cindy, a lot of times it's just having someone to talk to. We're as sick as our deepest secrets, and these people have sometimes carried around this secret for a long time. And oftentimes they don't even know they're carrying a huge secret. Someday it will come to them, and they need to have somebody to talk to about this, someplace to go with some of the things that have happened to them.
Well, and I think what's interesting is how they're treated as far as some kids that their parents are addicts, how the community treats the children, that they go to school sometimes and their parent hadn't taken care of them because their parent was so high that they didn't even know the kid needed to get up and go to school. So I think there's a lot of those issues going on as well, and part of what we want to do at Uncage Your Beauty is to create an environment for these moms that they are able to stay home with their children and not put that stress on our social economic system, that we're not only taking care of their moms while they're incarcerated, but we're also taking care of their kids while their moms are incarcerated. And that's one of the things that I've run up against in my community, because there's no place for these women to go when they get out. And we have a foundation called Birds Be Free Foundation that we're trying to open up a safe house for these women to go to, so they have a safe place to recover. Because a lot of times they end up back inside because they have no safe place to recover. And I know that there's also all kinds of help available to these women, and they have to want it. I mean, they have to want to reach out and get the help. And some of the things that I've seen are these women trying to get jobs. And if they have felons, it's just difficult to get a job, and they're trying to have enough money for their kids, or, they have no car, they have no food. It's just a huge cycle. And just coming along beside these women one at a time, we are definitely seeing the changes. And like you said, it's a group effort. It's all kinds of things that you can do for a person. I think by writing to them and doing makeovers on them, and coming along beside them when they get out, they see that there is value in who they are. And I think we all need to feel the value and not push them down and keep kicking them because they've made a mistake. I mean, like you said, they don't want to be an addict. They want to be in recovery.
You're right, Cindy. You said they have to want it. Yes, they have to want it, but they have to be able to find the help too. We need to make the resources available. I don't want to, we compare sometimes this disease to other diseases such as diabetes or hypertension or cancer. I don't know if those are fair comparisons or not, but if you take a look at what happens when someone walks into a healthcare facility with diabetes, hypertension, or even breast cancer, how they're treated. Women with breast cancer are immediately taken under the wing of the healthcare community. They're almost loved all the way along of their treatments. They have all kinds of, we have walks to raise money, to raise awareness. We have, they will go get them wigs. Churches will donate. They'll have lots of resources and lots of things available to people. And we need to make sure that this is happening for people with addiction also. Like you said, the bottom line is most people just want to be loved and know that they're loved. And once they can feel that, they can start loving themselves. A lot of these people don't love themselves, but if they can feel worthy and feel loved, if we can reach out to them and start providing them with resources, get them into programs. Treatment for addiction ought to be offered to everyone. Just like if you went to the hospital with a heart attack, you are rushed in and immediately helped. And I'm not saying addiction needs to be treated, exactly the same like that. But I do believe that there ought to be resources, and we ought to start helping people, and not, this is not a morality issue. We've already decided this is a disease.
Yeah, I agree with you, because if you look at the statistics on how many people go back inside after they've come out, it's pretty scary. So when they come out, there's nothing for them to go to, and so they go back to the same old, same old. And when you look at the rate of the people incarcerated alone in Indiana, the numbers are staggering. And, it costs about $96 a day just to keep someone in a prison. And in my county, it costs $25.26 a day to keep someone in jail. And 80% of what they're finding is all drug related, incarcerated. In my county, the report for most people that return back to jail is because they violated probation. That violation of probation more than likely will be they did a dirty drop, or what we call they flunked a drug test. And that gets them back in jail, and depend on how many times they violated, they'll usually end up in the Indiana Department of Correction or some kind of a prison to get them clean and to get them straightened out. And I do understand that we do need a system in place because, we don't want addicts out using, and, they would endanger other people as well. I mean, you don't want them driving and, doing crazy stuff. So I do believe what you said earlier. I think it takes a community to come along beside these people, our people. I went to Haiti on a missions trip after the earthquake, and I was amazed at how the community came together to help each other. And when I came back home, I thought, well, I need to do that in my community. I mean, I don't have to go across the ocean in order to do something effectively to make change in my community. And if it's just one person at a time, or one letter that I send, or one makeover that I do, then I'll be blessed for that. So I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to work with people in recovery. But let's talk about the family of addicts, how we get so entangled in their lives. And like I said earlier, my son's incarcerated, and I know for 10 years I chased that guy around like I was a crazy woman, and finally came to terms with the fact that I didn't cause it, I couldn't cure it, and it was up to him to do it. And I find that a lot of people do the same thing if their child is actively using and their husbands or wives are actively using. What kind of suggestion or advice do you have for people who are dealing with family members or loved ones that are actively involved in addiction?
It is a family disease, and when you live with an alcoholic or addict, or you're entangled or codependent on that person, you end up sick, sometimes sick or sicker than the addict. And there's a lot of information out there available. They also have a 12-step recovery for the families, which is called Al-Anon. There's therapy also for yourself. But yes, if you're a family member, a mother, father, wife, husband, it's going to be really important for you to take care of yourself and to get help and to learn as much as you can about addiction and the disease, so that you can help, because you walk a fine line between helping the person and enabling them to continue their disease and possibly continue to hurt themselves.
Dawn, when I would take my son to counseling when he first started using, one of the things the counselor said over and over again, there's 3 things that's going to happen to you. You're either going to be dead, you're going to be incarcerated, or you're going to end up in recovery. So 28 years of experience in working with people, what are some of the effects that you have seen, maybe long-term, short-term consequences that using drugs have had on people that you've been working with?
Well, there's a wide variety, or a wide spectrum of consequences. There's financial consequences, lost careers, lost licenses, lost money in the legal system, loss of health. There's cirrhosis, hepatitis. There's many diseases connected with long-term abuse of drugs and alcohol. Also in relationships, it affects all areas of your life. It can stunt your emotional growth where you start using. When you start using as a 10 or 12-year-old, or even in your teens, that is where you're at, excuse me, and you will be 30, 40 years old with the problems of a 30 and 40-year-old and only the coping skills of a preteen, since that's where you started using. Now, I don't say this because I think it's a lost cause. There's a lot of hope here, because when you stop using and you get into treatment and you get into recovery, you can start growing emotionally and spiritually.
Well, and also I think some of the ways that we can help the addicts in our life is to take care of ourselves. And we mentioned that earlier about Al-Anon and Nar-Anon, which are two organizations that work with people who have a loved one in their life that is an addict or in recovery. Because some of the things that I have found by going to Al-Anon and Celebrate Recovery is I can speak the same language. I understand what the person in recovery or the addict in my life is saying or what's going on with them, because I have invested in myself to figure out what needs to be done on my end in order to make my life better. Because clearly, Dawn, this is a growing issue. Alone in my county, the numbers are up on heroin addicts, meth addicts, painkiller. It seems to be a lot of where our young people are starting. And even one of the detectives that was on my son's case said that a majority of the young men that he puts in jail are anywhere from 20 to 26 years old. And he says it's definitely growing. You see that as well?
Yes, I would even venture to call this an epidemic. Uh, our society, we live in a very fast-paced society, very instant gratification. I know they're doing studies at IUPUI right now where even the scientist that I heard speak asked his two children, his son and his daughter, and they were, I'm going to say she was 6 and he was 4, and he asked them, do you want to have some hot chocolate now or wait until after your bath and have hot chocolate with marshmallows? And he made a guess as to which child he thought would say, oh no, I want the hot chocolate now. And he was wrong. His son, who's usually impulsive and all over the place, said, no, I want to wait and have the hot chocolate with marshmallows later. So we live in a society that with people who are developing personalities who are unable to delay gratification. We live in a fast-paced society. It's very hectic. And I do think if we don't learn coping skills growing up, learn how to meditate, relax, and different things that we can use, people are going to turn to drugs and alcohol. Drug abuse and addiction have negative consequences for a society. The overall cost is staggering as far as health, crime-related costs, people missing work. It's a public health issue. The loss of families falling apart, loss of employment, failure in school, domestic abuse, domestic violence, and child abuse.
According to the commander that, I work with, one of the questions I had for him was, how can our community come along besides those suffering with addiction? And his response was support, encourage, and most importantly, hold them accountable. Give them back their disease so they can learn to be in recovery on their own. Do you agree with that?
I do. I think that sums it up quite nice.
So as a mom, myself, being affected by the disease, I grew up with a mother that was an alcoholic. So this is very near and dear to my heart because I've lost not only a childhood to the disease, but my mother has died because of the disease. And for me, my mission is to come along beside women in recovery and help impact their lives, because my story is no different than theirs. This has been so good for me to hear some of the things that you've had to say and share with me your knowledge of the experience and strength and hope that you've gotten from being a person who has gone on educationally wise to help people with addiction. I would also like to know from you if, you were talking one-on-one to someone who was currently using and they were reaching out to you for help and they were ready, what would be some of the tools that you would give them to move forward in being in recovery?
They could talk to a trusted professional, whether it's their primary care physician, someone at the hospital. You can Google information. You can find out where the Narcotics Anonymous or Alcoholics Anonymous meetings are. There's the National Alliance for the Mentally Ill. There are lots and lots of resources out there. Phone numbers, you could start by calling 211 in our area is the information line, and start asking questions, and they will lead you to somebody who can help you or get you those resources. I admire what you're doing, Cindy. I value what happens when we treat addiction as equally as I value the other cures we've found in medicine. I remain a faithful advocate for the practice education research for those that are affected by addiction and those who seek recovery, as well as those who live it every day.
I so appreciate your wisdom, and keep moving forward in working with people in recovery. Because if we can just save one life, then I think we've done what God has called us to do. So thank you.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we had. Please subscribe to our podcast, like us on Facebook, and go to my website to see more stories of people that we are helping. Please tune in for our next episode of How I Found My Beautiful. I want to leave you with a quote from one of my favorite authors, Emily Dickinson. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all.